All right. Good afternoon, and welcome to the 2020 Young Authors Conference presented by Tri-County Educational Service Center and the Buckeye Book Fair. I'm so glad you decided to join us today. My name's Andrew Johnson, and I will be your host for this session. Before I introduce our featured author, I want to make sure everybody knows how to navigate both the Buckeye Book Fair and the Young Authors Conference websites. So I'm going to take you there real quick to make sure you know how to get around. So first off, to reach the Buckeye Book Fair website, you're simply going to type in buckeyebookfair.org. This will take you to the home page, and here you can look at the author lineup. You can actually go to the online bookstore. There's a link for registration for events, and you can submit questions to different authors. Additionally, for more resources, and if you are a student or a teacher in Tri-County, you can go to the Tri-County ESC Young Authors Conference website, which the link has been shared with you previously. And here you will find links to a number of sessions, today's session as well. And if you have a question, you can use the link right here to ask it to the author. And that is at the end of this session today, there will be time for question and answer. So submit a question there and you will get an answer from the author. Additionally, teachers, if you would like to have a certificate of participation for each of your classes that either view or attend this live session, you can click this link. It's just a short survey, and then you will have a certificate that you can proudly display in your classrooms. So with that being said, I'm going to go back to our presentation here. And I'm going to introduce our featured author. So I'm so glad that we have Dandi Mackall here with us today. Author Dandi Mackall won her first contest when she was a 10-year-old tomboy. Her 50 words on why I want to be bat boy for the Kansas City A's won first place, but the team wouldn't let a girl be bat boy. It was her first taste of rejection. However, since then, Dandi has become an award-winning author of about 500 books for all ages, from infant all the way up to adult, in every genre. Today's session is going to be focused on insider writing tips. And in this session, Dandi is going to discuss the power of story and will share her insider writing tips using her book, Larger Than Life, Laura. So without anything further, I'm going to turn it over to Dandi. Dandi, thanks for joining us today. Oh, Dandi, I think you are still muted. There you go.
Yeah. Have we got it? I don't have it on my screen, but does everyone else?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Can you see too? Because I can't see what we're looking at. There we go. Okay. Not that this is such a great show. I'm sorry you have to just look at me. Usually I'd be on your stage in the assembly at your school, and then I'd be standing up and acting out all this stuff. But we'll do what we can do. And thanks for coming. Because I feel like I'm in the presence of a bunch of writers. And I know even if your teachers made you watch this, you have to write. So you're going to be a writer. And if you don't hate writing, it could be that you are a writer, because most people hate to write. So there you go. I hate to start off with a confession, but I'm among writers, so I'll confess. I steal. Yeah, I steal. Now, I don't steal from other authors or from books, but I do steal from life. And I don't steal stuff that I could get put in jail for. But I think writers steal, they pay attention. And I know even when I go and do a school visit or when I'm out and about, especially before we had to kind of be careful being out and about, I would steal, like at a school, I might just kind of focus on somebody's eyes and think those are eyes that I need to use for this character in my book. So I'd steal eyes, and I've stolen hair and ears and noses and outfits, clothing, and all that kind of thing. I steal dialogue too, which is great because it keeps me up to date. For example, I was doing a school visit and I was just coming in the door. And then out in the hall, they were lining up. And I didn't see the kids, but I heard this conversation. I heard, first of all, a girl said, "Oh, no, you don't." And then this guy said, "Huh? Why? What did I do?" And she said, "You know what you did." And that stuck in my head. And sure enough, I ended up stealing it and putting it in a scene in a book. And I think that one was My Boyfriend's Dogs that got to be a Hallmark movie. But anyway, so you kind of have to be careful around writers. A writer needs to be the person who, like you, do you know when the first spring leaf will pop up on a tree and you'll notice it and be so excited? Or now, I guess, when the last brown leaf might be floating down to the ground or clinging onto your oak for dear life, and you just keep looking to see if it's going to stay there all winter. So we notice things. I was on a bus once and I didn't get off at the stop I should have because I was noticing this older man's face and it was just intriguing. And so I had to stay on so I could steal his face. So writers do that. I even steal when I do a school visit sometimes. I will ask questions, which is what I would do if I were at your school. And then your answers end up in a book. Like I remember I did the sequel to Art Linkletter's Kids Are Still Saying the Darndest Things. And I asked some of his questions. And then I did one about moms, all about moms. And I asked a second grade, one of my favorite answers, I asked a second grade boy, "Why do you think we have mothers?" And he said, "She's the only one who knows where the Scotch tape is," which moms would appreciate. And another one I asked, "What was your mom like? What do you think your mom was like when she was a little girl?" And this little girl said, "I don't know, because I wasn't there, but my guess would be pretty bossy." And for dads, I asked questions on those too. And that seemed like every boy wanted to believe when I'd ask who's the boss of your house, they'd all want to believe their dad was. But every now and then I'd get a question like, "My dad's the boss because my mom said so." And you see a little deeper. Or my favorite answer was, "My dad is the boss of our house. Until grandma comes over, then he's just one of us." So you never know. Oh, yeah. And then I was in my hometown, Hamilton, Missouri, and I went into a first grade class and I said, "Okay, what makes God angry?" And like every hand goes up. And this one little boy said, "I know what makes God angry. When his creations don't turn out too good, like cockroaches and my brother." So I'm sure you wouldn't have said that. Anyway, you are writers, like I said, and even if you don't like to write, I'll bet you like story. Story's so powerful. That's why you watch TV, right? Or YouTube or movies, because you like story. If you haven't gleaned the stories from your relatives, you need to do that, by the way. I love stories even before I could hold a pencil. I was writing them in my head. And at night, when I was young. Maureen and I, my sister, were blessed with parents who are great storytellers. But mom would come in and read a book, and then dad would come in and make up a story. And as soon as I could talk, I got to help. Like he'd say, once upon a time, there were 3 horses on a hill, and their colors were, and I'd say, brown, brown, and brown. And then eventually I got a little better, and he'd let me name them. He'd say, and their names were Brownie and Brown One and Browner. And eventually I got a little better than that. And now I write tons of horse books, and more than just their colors and their names. And so you never know where these stories will lead you. So pump your family for stories. And you won't be sorry you did, because some of the writing will just be for you. Some of it's to record stuff about your family. Find out, my goodness, do you know how your grandmother and your grandfather met, or the hardest thing your mom and dad ever had to go through? And you need to know that stuff so you can write it down and keep it. My first real tip, all of that was just kind of me spilling out, but my first real tip is write your heart. And that means write about things that you care about, that you really care about deeply. And if you're writing about something you're deeply interested in and you want to research and find out more about it, then that works too. But write from your heart. If you don't care about what you're writing about, then you can't expect a reader to care, right? I say, if I'm not crying over my novel and maybe laughing out loud, then something's wrong, because the reader won't do that either. So you have to write about things that you care deeply about. And the various coolest thing is, think about this. Nobody is like you, and nobody can write the story that you would write. I mean, even before you were born, in your mom's womb, you had all your DNA. And then after that, you have your own experience, and you live in the house and maybe have brothers and sisters, but you don't have the same experience because you're a middle child or the youngest or the oldest, and all that matters. And then after that, you gain more and more experiences, and you have your own thoughts and the way you look at stuff. And nobody is like you. There's just you. So if you're supposed to write a story or anything, nobody else can do it. It's up to you. And if it should be out there, it won't be out there because you didn't do it. So do it, right? Sometimes you don't even know if you're writing your heart. Like, I know that everything I write has a piece of me in it. And most of the time I know it going in, and then I change it around. Like in Winnie the Horse Gentler, that's just steeped in horsey stuff. Winnie, it doesn't always feel like she fits in. And I didn't always feel like I fit in school, in my classes. But I fit in with horses. And they were like my best friends. And eventually I kind of learned the way in to a class is by understanding horses. Like Winnie knows herd mentality. Like with a bunch of horses, or even 2, with a herd mentality, there's always a dominant mare, like a bossy female. And I kind of discovered that too in classrooms, that there's usually one gal who's the boss or bossy. And then there are always a couple of stallions who fight each other for this or that. And that's your way in. And so writing your heart, part of it is what you know about, what you're discovering as you go along, but what you care deeply about especially. And you don't always know. Like when I visited a school, and after the assembly, I went to a classroom and we were doing workshop stuff and question and answer. And one girl who sat on the front row said, why do you write so much about special need kids? And I thought she was mixed up because I've never really set out and written about a special need child. And I didn't want to embarrass her and say, hey, kid, you got the wrong author. So instead, I very tactfully said, well, I really don't, but what a great idea that is. I'm going to have to consider that. Thanks. After the question and answers were over, that gal came up and she had 14 of my books that she'd read listed, and all of them had a special need character in it. Someone who was a minor character who was autistic and was trained with horses to get better. And then there was another in Crazy in Love, the little sister was in Special Olympics. And then in Larger Than Life Laura, there is a gal who is going to get bullied because she's different from other kids. And the bullying is, the subtle bullying is even worse. And we do have a special need child who will always live with us. And like Larger Than Life Laura, Katie returns kindness for meanness. And that's what happens in Larger Than Life Laura. I think that because she's in my mind, and she was in Special Olympics, and there are just so many. Everybody should go to Special Olympic game, by the way. It's just so great. Even parents cheer for the other team. But that was an aside. Anyway, you write, and if you're really doing it from your heart, things will come out that you care deeply about. I'm going to move on, I think, to point of view. All right, I could talk about point of view for the whole hour. I do a lot of judging for writers, writer contests, and for school writing contests. And the number one reason why I think manuscripts or stories fail or aren't as strong as they could be is point of view. Like, point of view is showing your story through the heart, the mind, the spirit, the senses of your main viewpoint character. And I'll explain what I mean by that. But I'm going to give you an example first. All right, now, your whole life, you will only be inside one head, and that is your head, right? I mean, you know all of your thoughts, and you know what you're thinking. And even if you're saying something really nice to a friend, you're thinking, why on earth would she ever wear that shirt? But you know, your friends don't know that that's what's going on inside your head because they're in their own heads. They can't be in yours. Thank heavens, right? If your friend knew all the thoughts that you had and your parents, if everybody could see everything you've ever thought or are thinking or what's inside your head, you would have no friends, right? And your parents would probably disown you. So thankfully, we were built to only be inside our own heads, one at a time, right? Okay, you know what? Probably even after these few minutes, you maybe have made some observations about me because that's all you can do. You can't be inside my head. You can just maybe notice that I smile a lot and I laugh sometimes, and I do love to write, and maybe you can see that on me and you think, wow, she's really got it great. That would be so much fun to be Dandi. Or not. Maybe you're thinking, gosh, she's old. Because I can't be in your heads either. So that's it, though. That's all you can do is tell maybe by my expressions, what I say about myself, maybe what you've heard other people say about me. That's what it is in life. But you don't know. Maybe inside of my head and my heart right now, I'm about ready to cry. Maybe I'm so worried about the health of a couple of very important people to me. Maybe I ache all over, and maybe I think I'll never write another word, or no one's ever going to want to publish the thing I'm writing, or I just had a fight with my best friend, and all I can think is I won't have a best friend from this day on. And thankfully, all those things are not true. Okay. But you wouldn't know. If they were, you wouldn't know because you're not inside of my head. That's the dilemma of every kind of visual media, in, as well as your friend. Like you only know your friend, what they say about themselves, what they do, but you're not inside their head, right? Right? So you'll never truly understand them totally. Think of the person closest to you and what percentage they know of what goes on in your mind. Yeah, not that much, right? Okay. So when you're watching television, same thing. How can you get to know a character in a movie? You see them, you hear what they say, other people say about them, how they act, how they look, but you can't get inside their heads. You don't know what they're thinking. And so you can never identify like you can in a book. Because in a book, you get the unspeakable privilege of getting inside somebody else's head, some character's head, true. You hear and see and know the way that person looks at life and feels inside and their point of view, right? And so you could read a book that's about, I don't know, an Australian midget. And maybe for the first time you get it, how they might feel when somebody says something to them, or what they want in life, or how very much they are like you. Or you could read a book by someone from a different culture and a totally different economic system than you have. And maybe get a little insight because you can see what's going on in their lives and what's going on in their head. I think in Larger Than Life Lara, you will meet Lainey, who is my point of view character. And she is not like anybody you've ever met. I can pretty much guarantee it. And you get to know her thoughts and her hopes and her dreams and her disappointments and her fears. And maybe she'll help you connect and understand with somebody you do know. So in a book, that's what you get. You can never get that in TV or movies. Now, sometimes they'll try to get you those thoughts by voiceovers. If anybody ever watched The Wonder Years, and I'm sure there are other ones now too, but for example, someone's mom would bring your point of view character. Someone's mom would bring cupcakes to school, and he would take it and he'd say, "Thanks, Mom." And he might kind of look over his shoulder, but you don't see all the agony and stress because what's going on inside of him is conflicted. And so there'd be this kind of voiceover thing where he'd say, what my mom didn't know is this was the last thing I wanted her to do, to come to school, to bring these cupcakes that are horrible tasting. And I can just imagine what the kids are going to say. And yet he's saying, "Thanks, Mom. Thanks for coming." And there's that conflict that you can get in a book that it's just impossible to pull off on TV. So point of view is crucial. It's like the anchor of writing. All right. And you see the world in a different way. Excuse me. Here's the other thing is that by being able to be inside a character's head, it means you can't be in everybody's head. So when you write, focus on one main character. As you progress, you can figure out there are ways to do two characters, maybe one chapter this way, like in Just Saying, or in other things I've written where this is the guys and this is the girls, but it's one person at a time. And so that means that when my main character looks at other people, then you have to tell what you can actually see. Don't hand things out on a silver platter. For example, okay, what would you say I'm feeling right now in that little act there? Which, if I were in your school, I would make two kids come up and do this, but I have to do it myself. So anger, right? I'm not a great actress, but anger, we'll say. But in a book, you know, you don't just say, so she was angry. He was angry. Because that's just handing it out. That's not how life is. I don't know if you're really angry or not. All I really know is that maybe your eyes get squinty. So you say, and her eyes got squinty and she got wrinkles, even more wrinkles in her face. And she put her hands on her hips. And I knew she was probably very angry. But I wouldn't even say that last part because then the reader is involved. Or this, you know, something like that shows that she's excited and happy or whatever. And you know, the eyes get bigger and mouth gets wider, and people have different ways of showing it, but describe it in detail in the book instead of just saying she was happy, but he was really angry. Work at it and figure out how you know that. It's like clues on somebody's face. When your friend comes in to class and you end up thinking, boy, something went wrong this morning. Why do you know that? Figure it out. Is it the slump of the shoulders? Is it the silence? Whatever. But that's what you describe in a book with a good point of view. All right, so I better move on to character. And now I'm going to rely more on larger than life Laura. All right, this book, I got to tell you, I've written a lot of books, and I have fun, and they come from different places, and we can talk about that later too. But Larger Than Life Laura came in a way that no other book has ever come for me. I wish they did, but this was it. I woke up at 3 a.m. and believe me, I had a contract to do a series of horse books, and I was on a pretty tight schedule, so I didn't need a new book idea. But I woke up at 3 a.m. and it was like I could hear this kid, tough as nails, say, "This story is not about me, so already you got a reason to hang it up." Well, I knew enough about voice and how important it is to almost hear your main character. And so I thought I better write it down. And so I did. I got out of bed and I walked across the hall and I came right here into my office and I wrote down on a piece of paper and I just kept going. And I ended up writing that whole first chapter. And so I went back to bed. Well, in the morning, I woke up and my first thought was, oh my goodness, did I just have a brilliant idea? Or did I just dream I had a brilliant idea? Because that happens a lot. I'll wake up and I'll think, I really did something great. And I know I jotted it down, and I'll either look by my bed and there's nothing written and no sign of brilliance, or there's something illegibly scrawled on that pad. And that happens most of the time. But anyway, so I quickly ran to my office and sure enough, there it was. And I typed in the whole thing. And then I just kept going and going until I got stalled, which I'll tell you about later. But it was fun waking up every morning trying to see what she would be into. All right, so character is the first thing. Now we're getting down to the nitty gritty of story. And I always start with the character. And I'll tell you why. All right, have you ever been watching YouTube or TV and say you're flipping the channels, somebody actually let you have the remote and you are flipping the channels from one to the other and you see on the screen and there's a guy who's jumps out of a car and then hangs onto a cliff and dangles there and someone else comes along and tries to step on his hand and then another car comes and the police are, and you change the channels. Now, how can that happen? All that excitement and you don't care? Yeah, you don't care because you don't know that character. If you don't care about a character, you put the book down, right? Or you turn channels and change channels. But in a book, if you love that character and you feel for that character, just a little thing can happen. Like say she sort of in a new school and she not getting well received and walks to sit down with her lunch, and a girl says, "Oh, you can't sit at this table. We have a table full of friends. There's one over there and it's an empty table and you sit there." Or, I'm sorry, or it could be that someone has always been a student here, but then some kid says to him, "Are you going to wear that same shirt every day?" And he is, because that's all he's got. And if you care for the character, that gets you more than somebody dangling off a cliff. So if you don't care for the character, you can do anything you want to, set them on fire, throw them off the cliff, and you could care less. But if you care about a character, then we're in and we're connected. All right. So I'm going to read what Larger Than Life Lara says about it. I don't know. This might not be fun to watch, but just listen. Oh, also that in this book, see, first chapter is called Character, but the book this one has everything I know about writing in it. And I was a third of the way through before I realized that every single chapter was showing you it was happening. The story was going, but it was also a part of story. So like the contents are the beginning, character, the beginning, villain, setting, dialogue, opposition, and those things are happening. So when you get to the climax, it's really the climax happening in the story. So anyway, it all kind of came together as not even teaching these things, but you're reading and realizing that that's where you are, that this is rising action. Okay, but we start with character, chapter 1. This is, I'll show you the book instead of me for a while, give you a break. Okay, this isn't about me, this story I mean, so already you got a reason to hang it up. At least that's what Mrs. Smith, my teacher, says. She teaches fourth graders in Paris, Missouri, how to write stories, but I think she'd about 100 million times rather be in the real Paris, France, writing her own stories. So anyway, she says, you got to start with the character when you start your story. And since I'm the first character you hear from in my story, that should mean it's about me, Lainey Grafton, age 10 or nearly so, small for her age, but tough as a horseshoe, thanks to 3 big brothers and 1 bathroom. Stringy brownish hair and brown eyes, not much to look at, but couldn't make a living scaring crows neither. But it's not about me, because once you get yourself a character for your story, Mrs. Smith says you give that character a problem. And we'll get into that in a little bit when we talk about the structure of a story. But you start with the character. Lainey doesn't want to admit that she's really going to be our point of view character and that we care about her. She's telling you the story of Larger Than Life Lara, a girl who shows up in their school and is very large. But what Lainey can't get over, she is the largest girl that Lainey's ever seen, but what she can't get over is that Lara has a smile that just doesn't go away. And eventually you can see how she exchanges kindness for meanness. It's like sprinkling kindness like confetti. And she ends up changing her school. But right now, we'll just talk about character and what makes a good character. One thing is there's probably some piece of me in every character, but not me, because I'm more boring than my characters are. So if you're just like a regular good kid, you might not want to use yourself unless you're going to combine it with something else. A character needs to have a flaw. That means not perfect, right? Not always a good guy and not always perfect, because that character has to grow during your story and has to change through all the conflict and the opposition, learn things about himself and not be the same at the end of a story as he was in the beginning of the story, or you haven't done your job. He needs to grow. And So you've got to give him room to grow. If he's perfect in the start, you got nowhere to go, right? All right, so you want someone who, the more unique, the better. Quirky, fun, interesting, whatever there is that will set this character apart from other characters in other books and still be someone you want to root for and identify with, even though they've got flaws, because we all do, right? If you wonder where I'm glancing, I admit that I have some notes right over here, because otherwise I take all my rabbit tracks and then I never get to the other tips. So I'm glancing at it right now. All right. Let's see, growth. I said that. All right, cool. We get to go then to the next thing I'm going to show you, which is this, and you won't be able to see it very well, but what happens is in the chapter on character, here we go. Here's what Lainey says. She says, all right. Sometimes Mrs. Smith makes us do these exercises on describing characters when we write stories in class. Characterization, she calls it. She passes out papers that look like this. Okay, can you see this? It says, blank is the kind of person who blank. Now, I'd encourage everybody to do this in your class. Not right now, because you got to listen to me, but this would be a cool thing to do, because it gets to the essence of a character. Like, well, I'll read you what Lainey writes about larger than life Laura. And this is after she comes in, and I mean, she takes up almost a whole, they have to get her a teacher desk to sit behind, yet she's got this smile. There's just something different about her that's not just her size. But here's some of Lainey's attempts at telling you what larger than life Laura is like. Laura is the kind of person who would be the only one left in Kansas if a tornado blew everybody else to Oz. Mrs. Smith wouldn't like that one, though, because it's too long. Laura is the kind of person who almost makes you feel normal. Nah. Laura is the kind of person you never forget. You might want to do that exercise with your teacher. Like, your teacher is the kind of teacher who, what? Could it be the kind of teacher who makes you wish you'd never raised your hand in the first place and vow that you'll never raise it again? Or do you have a teacher who, my teacher is the kind of teacher who makes you feel like the smartest person in the room, even though you got the answer wrong, and when you wrote it down, you spelled it wronger, you know? So maybe you could do that in your classroom too. Do it with a friend or do it with yourself. You're the kind of person who, what? One thing that nails it. And then in your story, you show that. You don't just say it. Instead, you show through actions your story. So it's a good way of getting at the heart of the character, and that's a good way to start your story. So I'll show you what I keep looking over here. That's this. Okay, and now I'm ready to turn the page. All right. After character, now we get to talk about where you go from there. So say you've got this terrific character. Lainey's going to tell you exactly where to go from there. Okay. Now this is back in that first chapter where she's told you Mrs. Smith would have you start with a character, and it should be Lainey, but it's not. She says, but it's not about me, because once you get yourself a character, this is it, one paragraph, guys. This is how you write a story. Because once you get yourself a character for your story, Mrs. Smith says, you give that character a problem. And the whole rest of the story is about that problem getting bigger and bigger, and the character getting to be a better and better person. And then the character solves the problem, and that's it, the end. She does add, only it's not me what's got the problem. And I'm not a better person than I was 3 months ago when all this stuff happened. Just ask my daddy or any of my 3 stupid brothers if you don't believe me. So like I said, this story is not about me. And Mrs. Smith, if you're out there reading it, well, I'm just sorry about that, but that's the way it is. Sometimes stories don't work out like they're supposed to. Okay, so here's what she said, guys. You start with that character. Oh, this is my high tech. I'm high energy and low tech. So this is my diagram. Can you see that? All right, this is the essence of story. All right, you start with your character, and the character has to want something. First, I'll tell you. Your character has a problem and wants something. For example, let's see, we'll take Lainey. Lainey wants to be an actress. Oh, she would never tell anybody that in a million years. She wants to be an actress. So a character wants something, and the rest of the story is about her trying to get it. But part of that diagram is going to show you, not only does she want something, but she needs something. And this is where her problem is. She has a problem that she has no one in her life who will ever say, good job, Lainey. And that's all she really wants, is some kind of an affirmation that she's not a nothing. And so because of that need, that gives you the motive of her actions. And then you get plot. So she wants something because she needs something, and then she's going to try to get it. And I tell you what, this is the skeleton of a story. It's not a formula, because stories can't go great when you do a formula, but we have skeletons just like our bodies do, but we don't look the same. This is a skeleton. So you have a character who wants something and will try to get it. See, I thought plot was so hard, but that's what plot is, a character trying to get what he wants or what she wants. And like in a picture book, there's the classic 3 tries where you try and then you really fail. And so you end up worse off, and you try again and you fail again and try again. 3 tries. You can have as many tries as you want, even in a picture book, but you can keep going as long as things get worse and worse and your character gets to start to learn something about her need and starts changing. So once that happens, then of course you go to the climax where it's worse off than ever. And in the climax, that's where the character gets it and understands something about herself, like Lainey will, and changes and then acts on it. And then you have a resolution, which could be happily ever after, not so much anymore, but could be some kind of upbeat, because everybody in that classroom has changed and they're better than they were when the story started. All right, so now we can take my classy diagram. All right, here we go. Story. A character wants something, but also needs something, and that's the problem. Motive is that Lainey needs somebody to say, good job, Lainey, to make her feel like she's worth something. And then the plot, which I always thought was so horrible, tries to get what she wants. And in the process, she'll grow through opposition. Oops. Gosh. Uh-oh. Something happened here. Can anybody save me? Can you hear me?
You're still fine. Yep, we can still hear you. You're perfect. So
can you see me?
You might not see something on your screen, but we can still see you. So you're
totally okay.
fine.
You can see me? Wow.
Yep, for sure.
All right.
It's
well, good. And I don't
about 1:45 right now. So just to give you a time check, okay?
Okay. And we're done at what time?
We're done at 2. So we'll have about probably in the next 5 minutes to 10 minutes, we can wrap up, and we'll do maybe 5 minutes of questions. So how about
Okay.
10 more minutes? Okay.
Great, thanks. All right, well then, I'm just hoping that you can see this since I can't see my screen anymore. All right, so tries to get what she wants and grows through opposition and conflict. So here you are, character, tries to get what she wants. She has to act. Lainey does. And then because she does, kids make fun of her when she tries out for the play. And that puts her in an even worse position. And then she's determined to really work at it. And that's what she does, but she has trouble learning the lines, and her dad says she can't do it. And so she's lower than ever. And then she will connect with larger than life Lara and try something that fails and causes things to be worse than ever. It's the lowest point in my mind, is the climax. So here she is at the climax of the story. And that's where we call it epiphany. It's where the light goes on and she gets it. She understands her need and that she's grown and can see herself and can see Lara and all of them. And because of that light going on and the change, she acts, and that's called resolution. So basically that's what there is to a plot in a story. And you go back and you write and you rewrite and you revise, and you welcome all criticism that comes in, even from your teacher, because after you do that initial skeleton with your story, all you can do is make it better. I probably love rewriting better than writing in many cases, because it's just so fun. All you can do is make it better and better with the details and like the setting. Okay, so one more thing gosh. All right, so I got to tell you about frozen moments. Okay, there was a moment when larger than life Lara comes into the room, and Lainey looks up, and everybody in the class is looking at the doorway. And they don't do that. I mean, a couple of kids always sleep in class, and a couple of girls only care about themselves, but everybody is looking with their mouths wide open. And then she looks, and here's what she says about it. All of this happened in just a couple of seconds, I guess, but it felt like it was a frozen piece of time. Mrs. Smith told us about frozen moments. This is where I get my best scenes, you guys. Sometimes whole countries and even the whole world has stuff happen that people will remember for the rest of their lives. Like Mrs. Smith said, she knows people who were alive when President John F. Kennedy got shot and killed dead, and every single one of them can tell you where they were and who was in the room with them when that president got shot and killed. Plus also, you can ask Mrs. Smith herself where she was on that day of 9/11 when the planes flew into the World Trade Center. And her eyes will go blank because she's seeing it happen all over again. That's what Mrs. Smith says. And I believe her, because I can tell you exactly where I was when that school shooting happened. I was homesick from school, only I was faking sick. And I was all by myself watching TV, only I'm not supposed to let on I was by myself because the social worker will get after my daddy again. I was wearing the pajamas I hate because they have kites on them. And I've never ever had a kite, and I would really like one. Well, the room smelled like tobacco and bananas, and there was a buzzing from the TV because daddy hooked it up himself to cable so he didn't have to pay. And sometimes shows like even Jungle Animal Planet looked like they had snow on them. And then I was changing channels, and I saw a school with kids running outside every which way, and parents hugging and crying in the parking lot, and police cars and police people racing around like they were chasing ghosts and didn't know where they got off to. Plus there was a pop, 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 pop in the background, and all kinds of screaming going on. So I thought it was a movie and I'd watch it, only, well, you know the rest. And that was a long digression. I'm sorry I didn't put it in parentheses, but the stuff about frozen moments, and listen to this part, you guys, because you all have them. They don't have to be that dramatic. They can just be the first time a teacher said, good job. You're a good reader, aren't you? And you never thought about that. Or it could be the first time somebody said, you know, you just look funny. But the stuff about frozen moments is important, because if you land into one, then you've got some good material for your story, because you can call it up in your head again and have everything you need right there. It doesn't go away on you like other memories. It's frozen. And this can be a good thing or a bad thing. If you remember 3 specific moments from first grade, then you're doing well. And you remember them for a certain reason, because they were intense, because they were strong emotions. These make the best scenes in a story, no matter how you end up giving them to your main character in a different setting and whatever. But the emotions, the smells, you've got them all right there in full color. And they say, if I were smarter, I'd give you, and we had more time, I'd tell you about all these brain studies that have been done, that when there's an intense emotion, then it's like a brand on your brain and you never forget it. And even like when you're old like me and you can't remember if you had breakfast or not, or what you had for breakfast, if you had it, then you still remember in detail that moment in the first grade when you had no coat and somebody laughed at you, or whatever it is, that's your frozen moment. But dig for those, because those are gold. Those are golden scenes you can put together. I know we're almost running out of time, but I just wanted to show you one. I'll just tell you then one more thing, is that when you're inside a character's head, everything gets extra time. Everything gets extra mileage. For example, chapter 5 is setting in here, and Lainey says, Mrs. Smith, if you're reading this, I know I'm to chapter 5 and there's no setting yet, but school has very little setting. So we'll go to my house. We've got a lot of setting at my house. Boy, does she ever. But the cool thing is, as she crosses the railroad tracks and other kids go off to their homes, when she gets to her home, she tells you this. She says, our house is just like whiteboard and some of the paint's peeling, but it has a long skinny window in the front, and then also a short window that's a square next to it, so that our house always looks like it's winking at you when you walk up. And that, I thought the same thing, because I pass a house like that almost every day. But to Lainey, that just shows you something hopeful about her character. So, well, guys, I guess we're going to get into, I wanted to tell you about where some good places, other places besides Frozen Moment, your family and their stories, and then what's happened to you and what you're interested in. Those are all things, right? What you know, and then just purely what you're interested in. I write a lot of stuff that I knew nothing about and just loved it, learning about them and incorporating them in this story. So is it time for us to do question and answer?
Yes, I believe it is.
Okay.
And we've got some really great questions. So we'll try to get through as many as we can.
Okay.
So the first question up was, what was the inspiration behind your latest book?
Oh, what a good question. Well, I'm usually working on a couple at the same time. And I'm working on a grown-up book that I really just finished. And it's about a young woman who loves dogs and has a dog and has a radio station that people call in with their problem dogs, and she helps them solve the problems. And of course, it's a romance, and it's like filled with opposition and conflict. And I know that came just because we've always had dogs. And I'm working on a picture book that's about horses. And so we know where that came from. And then there was just one that I did, a board book that came out, and let's see, God is always there. And I guess to me, that's what I feel. That's what gets me through everything. And I just wanted kids to know that they're never alone, even when they're lost, that they don't have to be alone. So all different places is where they come from. That is a good question.
Here was another really good question. So what's a good tip for overcoming writer's block?
Not believing in it. I don't believe in writer's block. I know it happens, but you know, it doesn't happen that often. And if you just skip it, jump over the block and write. If you can see anything down the line in your story, write it. If you know how it's going to come out, or if you can see that climax when the light goes on inside your character's head, write that. Or if you can even think of what if's a good way to get ideas. So, you know, what if my character fell into a lake and couldn't swim? And then just write a scene like that. And pretty soon you're just moving forward. Now for me, because I do a couple of different books at the same time, as long as they're not, I wouldn't do 2 adult novels at the same time, but I would do a young adult mystery and a picture book or a chapter book or something. But change channels and start working on something else, pick up something new. And before you know it, you'll want to go back and finish that other one.
About how long does it take you to write a book?
Good question. Sometimes, because I love to rhyme, I could do a first draft of a rhyming picture book in a weekend, but then it would take me about 3 months to go back and make sure every single word is the word that I want, that my rhythm, and I'd scan them for meter, that it would be exactly right, so that anybody could pick up the book and make it sound like when I read it, you know, when it sounds right. And so that would be for that one. They take different amounts. I had when I did the horse series, Winnie the Horse Gentler series, we settled, they wanted me to do a new book every 3 months, and we settled on every 4. And I probably came in closer to 3 months. And that was all I worked on because it was kind of hectic. But for, I don't know what you can see anymore, but With Love Wherever You Are, that book, it took at least, well, I will say 10 years, because I actively wrote on it for 10 years. But it took longer because these are my parents on the cover of the book. They were Army doctor and Army nurse in World War II. And so I grew up on their stories about meeting and then, you know, getting married after they met, like in basic training for 3 weeks. They got married. A couple of weeks later, they had to go overseas and be in different, like Dad was, you know, in Alsace-Lorraine and then into Germany with a mobile unit. My mom was at a burned out bread factory in France that they turned into a hospital. So I knew those stories and grew up, but it took me so long. And then they left me over 600 letters that I didn't even know existed. And so I had to go through those. And so it can take.
That's really neat. So you use your own personal experiences to create something that's meaningful for others too. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. And sometimes it comes fast and sometimes it takes years. And you never know either. That's my last thing was going to be play with words, you know, love words and then play with stuff. I reward myself after I finish a book. I get to play for like a couple of days and write something that I will never try to get published. But my best stuff have come from that play pile, in fact. And I wrote the first chapter of The Silence of Murder that won the Edgar Award. And I wrote it 10 years before I wrote the whole book. And every year probably I'd come back and play around with that first chapter, and then suddenly I just could see the whole thing as a mystery. So play.
Well, thank you so much, Mrs. Mackall. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for the questions too, you guys.
And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quickly here just to finish up. As a reminder, if you would like to visit the Buckeye Book Fair online, you can go to buckeyebookfair.org. The online book fair is there. You can actually purchase books right online, as well as see all of the sessions that are available. Teachers And students, you can also go to Tri-County ESC's website for Young Authors Conference. And just as a reminder, if you would like to have a certificate made for participation today, teachers, all you need to do is click on the link underneath the session where it says for teachers, and you will have a participation certificate emailed to you shortly after you complete the short survey. So with that being said, we really appreciate you, Mrs. Mackall, and here are some links, and I'm going to turn it over to Julia at Buckeye Book Fair. So thank you very much.
Thanks. That's awesome.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. We're very excited to have this as our first program. Thank you, Dandi. And we hope you will join us next week as we continue our Young Authors series.